The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
Liberty. Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
Cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
President Trump says no to a virtual debate with Joe Biden. So now we won't even have a second presidential debate. Will there be a third? Nobody knows, as events during this election season spiral increasingly out of control. Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. We will examine the latest in a seemingly endless series of shocks to the system, with President Trump now refusing to participate in the new format ordered up by the Commission on Debates. This after Mike Pence did his best to clean up some of the self-inflicted damage by the president in his first presidential debate, with a command performance in his vice presidential debate against Kamala Harris. We'll review the bidding on where this race stands in the aftermath of the VP debate and the likely cancellation of the next presidential head-to-head, and whether Joe Biden's apparent lead is real and stable. LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaeffer will join in the analysis. We'll consider the ultimate question facing shell-shocked American voters, whether Joe Biden is capable of leading a fractured nation. And we'll bring on LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza for Talkin' Liberty.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off with our signature segment, Say What?, where we roll out some of the most wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class in this damnable year of 2020. So as if we haven't been through the ringer enough this year, President Trump says no to a virtual debate, even though he is by most accounts well behind in the race and appears to be falling further behind. But one thing's for sure, Trump had two chances to get in front of millions of people before the election, and now it's down to one if the scheduled third debate even goes forward on October 22nd. This latest episode occurring the day after Mike Pence and Kamala Harris clashed in their one and only vice presidential debate on Wednesday. Their verbal joust has been thoroughly evaluated at this point, but the residue remains from two running mates more likely to ascend to the presidency than ever, given that Biden's in a state of cognitive decline and Trump has been hit with COVID-19. And both of them came out swinging it, with Senator Harris condemning Trump in the starkest possible terms on his handling of the pandemic, and Pence firing a broadside back at her.
The American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all.
And quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about.
Pence referring to Biden being forced out of the 1988 presidential race after revelations about him plagiarizing speeches and law school submissions. But listen to the exchange between the VP candidates when Harris was asked if she would welcome a vaccine which may well come before the end of the year.
If the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it. Absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
The fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives.
Pence went on to re-emphasize the same issue about the Supreme Court that Joe Biden sidestepped in last week's debate with Trump.
Your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules.
Like Biden, Harris refused to answer whether she favors packing the court. But as the debate closed, the moderator, Susan Page, who'd done a good job most of the night, unlike Chris Wallace at the presidential debate last week, asked the question now being openly debated on the left, whether Trump would leave the White House if he loses but refuses to accept defeat. And Vice President Pence put it right back in the face of Senator Harris and her leftist colleagues.
Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign. We've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then, Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call.
And thus ended what was a command performance by Mike Pence, clearly far more effective than Trump's first debate. Kamala Harris, not so good. But then we should hardly be surprised. This was a woman whose personality turned people off as she bombed out in her own presidential campaign. The question now is whether a VP debate ever really influences the outcome of any election. But if there ever was one, it might be this one, because health concerns about both presidential candidates means the possibility of either Kamala Harris or Mike Pence becoming president before the 2024 election seems more real than ever. After the COVID-plagued but recovering president ignited yet another firestorm with a tweet saying he feels better than he has in 20 years, and this statement about COVID right after his release from Walter Reed Hospital.
Don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines, all developed recently. I know there's a risk, there's a danger, but that's okay. And now I'm better. But don't let it dominate your lives. Get out there. Be careful.
And then, of course, the elite Trump-hating media went nuts.
Now we see this tweet, which is heartless. It is cruel.
What does that mean, don't be afraid of it? I mean, first of all, it's a contagious disease that kills people. There's nowhere to even begin.
It's just so horrible, so destructive to say, I feel better than I have in 20 years.
Saying this is so disrespectful.
The president says it's no big deal. I mean, it's outrageous.
It's disgraceful, Wolf. It's absurd.
Bob Woodward, Jake Tapper, Wolf Blitzer among the commenters there. Meanwhile, Biden remained mostly in his basement this week, but did appear on an NBC News town hall and answered the enduring question of whether he would be overrun by the growing socialist movement in his party.
I look like a socialist. Look, I'm the guy that ran against the socialists. Remember, I got in trouble in the whole campaign. 20-some candidates. Joe Biden was too centrist, too moderate, too straightforward. That was Joe Biden. I have taken on the very people that, in fact, we're worried about.
Quick break, and then we're back to consider a burning question for those thinking about or planning to vote against Donald Trump. Is Joe Biden capable of leading a fractured nation?
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Election 2020 Big Bottom Flash Reports are coming. On election night, at the bottom of every hour, LibertyNation.com will give you Election Night 2020, 90 seconds at a time, with our Big Bottom Flash Reports. You'll get the drop with our one-stop shop. Tune into LibertyNation.com on election night for our Big Bottom Flash Reports, at the bottom of every hour. LibertyNation.com.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, now that our betters in big corporate media have all but called the election for Joe Biden, salivating at the thought of anyone but Donald Trump occupying the Oval Office, we come face to face with a proposition all but dismissed just a few months ago. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. as the leader of the free world. Now, the key word in there is leader, because what people of all political stripes are thirsting for in this time of peril, with multiple existential crises occurring in real time, is genuine leadership. The times call for a man or woman with the ability to see beyond the fog of political and cultural upheaval, reassure a flagging people, and present a coherent and saleable and optimistic vision of the future. And while we are all now well aware of Donald Trump's leadership skills, like them or not, we are compelled to undertake a thorough examination of the leadership capacity of the Democrat nominee, whose campaign has been defined by, shall we say, a low profile. Questions abound, and they start with the issue of the former vice president's evident cognitive decline. No doubt, the man who played wingman for Barack Obama and debated effectively against Sarah Palin in 2008 and Paul Ryan in 2012 demonstrated the political skill and mental acuity commensurate with the role of vice president. But is there anyone who would deny that he's hardly the same man today? He presents as elderly, plotting, intentional with every move and utterance, projecting a level of mental and physical agility hardly befitting the job description of the most powerful man in the world. The striking contrast with Donald Trump, the COVID-plagued but endlessly dynamic 45th president, is hard to miss. At the same time, it's logical to assume that after 4 years of Trump, the firestorms which have defined his deliberately disruptive presidency and the downward spiral in this year like no other, many people may have just reached the point where they believe normalcy as it was once defined, optimistically framed as a calm and steady hand at the helm per no-drama Obama, should be the hallmark of a leader for such a time as this. After all, it seems everything has changed since COVID-19 laid down an indelible marker, driving us forward to a future far more unknown than we could have possibly imagined when the calendar first turned to 2020. Will voters, 4 years after bravely rejecting the status quo to which Biden would return us, decide to do a 180 and go back to the future when everything we hold dear has been stretched to the breaking point and the old normal is no longer even possible? Then there's the matter of the Biden agenda. Compare the positions he's publicly embraced on critical issues for almost 50 years to those he now holds in deference to the Democrats' hard-left progressive base on areas as diverse as the environment, taxes, trade, criminal justice, guns, others. Does Biden have the capacity to hold his own against the mounting pressure of leftists employing his harmless face as a front for their radical policy prescriptions? We could fully expect a proliferation of conspiracy theories mirroring those from the left during the Bush 43 presidency, when it was assumed that Dick Cheney was the man behind the curtain calling the shots for the hapless man in the Oval Office. Would Biden be capable of holding back the forces within his own party seeking an undiluted Green New Deal and 100% government-run health care, and the astronomical tax hikes and economy-crippling regulations necessary to implement them? How will Joe Biden sell the idea that shutting down fossil fuel industries is worthwhile as millions lose their jobs to the futuristic vision of a 100% green economy? But with less than a month to go before Election Day, Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis has apparently put the pandemic back atop the list of issues concerning the voters. When President Trump shut down travel from China in January, Biden condemned the move, called it xenophobic. He later objected to Trump's travel ban from Europe. Imagine if we had followed the counsel of Biden instead of Trump. Many thousands more would certainly have died. The former vice president played Monday morning quarterback on virtually every hard decision Trump was forced to make during a pandemic which refuses to surrender. But he's offered little to nothing in the way of alternatives. He and his fellow travelers on the left have depicted Trump as a dictator from the moment he descended that escalator more than 5 years ago. And yet, as the president rightly placed the ultimate power to address this crisis in the hands of individual state governors per the 10th Amendment and the federalist nature of the U.S. Constitution, Biden has, with great cruelty, assigned Trump the singular blame for the over 200,000 who've died with or from COVID. But is that leadership? Throwing verbal stink bombs from the safety of the cheap seats while the man in the arena is struggling to catch a tiger by the tail? On the international front, as with many other issues, Biden has reversed his rhetoric on the nation which presents the greatest threat to America, now talking tough about China to match Trump's hard line after decades of official appeasement in the Senate and as vice president. In the end, could a President Biden truly be his own man? Is he capable of commanding the room, commanding the stage, and commanding the nation in a time of profound crisis? Can we be confident in the wrenching and complex and profoundly significant decisions he would make as the nation's chief executive, affecting the lives of hundreds of millions of people? Those are the questions that should be burning inside voters trying to decide whether the Donald Trump era should come to an end after 4 years or 8. Quick break, and then we'll review the bidding on where this race stands in the aftermath of the VP debate and the likely cancellation of the next presidential head-to-head, and whether Joe Biden's apparent lead is real and stable.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The polls continue to show Joe Biden with a commanding lead over President Trump with just over 3 weeks left before Election Day. And now Trump has said he will refuse to participate in the second head-to-head scheduled for this Thursday after the debate commission changed the format to a virtual debate. If the polls are right, this race is already over because no candidate can make up an 8 or 10-point deficit in less than a month. especially when he's trying to do so amid a pandemic, a backdrop of urban unrest and cultural upheaval, a war over the Supreme Court, the president coming down with a virus, and a plot by radical militia to kidnap the governor of Michigan, all in this year like no other. But then these poll results are close to what the pollsters were predicting at the same time in 2016. Joining us to evaluate the latest shockers and the state of the race as we head down the stretch is our old friend, LibertyNation.com's outspoken political columnist, Joe Schaeffer. Joe, welcome back.
Hello, Tim. I'm feeling rather outspoken, so you may have to rein me in today.
No, I'm going to cut you loose because I've been rendered virtually speechless by the succession of events in this damnable year. But the polls, Joe, all tell the same story. Joe Biden with a commanding and growing lead. Do you believe them? And after the VP debate, which you wrote about and described as a slam dunk victory for Mike Pence, and no second debate by Trump's own choice, what does Trump do now?
You know, if I'm a Trump supporter, I'd be more worried if they weren't rolling out this same tired playbook from 2016. We're seeing everything all over again. They're trying to declare the Democrat the winner before people go to the ballot box. They've got a colluding media involved in this. The polls are all on board. You know it's a sad situation when Democrats are getting paranoid about polls showing Biden so far ahead. When that poll came out that said Biden was up 11 points in Florida, Democrats were all over social media saying, well, this is a conspiracy. They're trying to repress our vote. Turn out, people. Turn out, people. This is not true. This poll is not true. Democrats were saying that about the fix that's in. So that's how out of control this is. If you're a Trump supporter, you want to see this, as crazy as it sounds, because it lets you know, again, that, you know, these people realize what's going on, which really is that they're in serious trouble. Trump dominated the second half of his debate with Joe Biden. The first half, not so good. The second half, he dominated. And Mike Pence completely steamrolled Kamala Harris. The most important takeaway from that was she never laid a glove on him, and she never came close. And she was supposed to be Biden's pit bull, attack dog. And Pence, I just thought he so easily dismissed her, and she was so lacking in substance. The Democrats are in trouble, and the media is going to tell you otherwise. And if you're a Trump supporter out there, don't believe it. 2016 all over again. Do not believe it.
After rolling out perhaps the most effective campaign slogan ever 4 years ago, Make America Great Again, the Trump campaign has struggled to come up with a theme or a slogan for 2020. They've got just over 3 weeks left. What themes should Trump be hammering in particular right now?
I think he was doing just fine before he got his coronavirus diagnosis, which unfortunately for him has kind of slowed down his momentum. He was appealing more to the base. It's something I thought he should have done at the convention. And surprisingly, everybody loved the convention on the Republican side. I thought he should have been tossing more red meat, which he sort of is doing now. But what you have to understand is this is an incumbency president. He's running for re-election here. It's not the insurgency president of 2016. I personally wish it were more like that. But he needs to rally his base. And what is going to rally his base is exactly what we're seeing right now. People saying, oh, Biden's dominating this thing. He's running away in the polls. Trump's in trouble. In 2016, I remember Republican media outlets, a lot of them who were hostile to Trump, saying this thing's over, this is a mess. Gee, I hope some Republicans running for Congress can win. And it was so obvious and transparent that the establishment was worried. And so what we have here is a repeat of that. And all Trump has to do is say, they're trying to steal this from you. Look what they're doing. They're playing the same book. The polls, we're in disarray. We're struggling. We have no message. Don't believe it. Get out there and vote. The people who put him into office in 2016, this feeds right into why they did that. They don't trust the experts. They don't trust the establishment. So all Trump has to say is, look what they're doing. They're trying to steal this from you, and he's going to get that turnout that he needs.
You know, Joe, it occurs to me, the question, has anybody ever had better luck than Joe Biden in 2020? I mean, first, his party cleared the primary field after he failed to go anywhere in the early contests. So they cleared the path to his nomination. Then Trump gets enmeshed in a pandemic, which allows Biden to grandstand and condemn the president from the safety of the sidelines and claim he could do much better, and to remain in his basement, giving him legitimate reason to remain at home, avoiding close scrutiny, and trying to freeze the ball and run out the clock, which he is close to being able to do. Has anyone ever had better luck in a campaign than Joe Biden in 2020?
Well, I wouldn't call it luck. I would call it, this was a deliberate plan, a deliberate policy. I think Democrats realized very early in the game in 2019 that they didn't have a strong candidate. They just did not. You looked at those early Democratic primary debates, June 2019, and it was a train wreck. So, I don't understand why Trump's not doing this virtual debate. He'll still be good at it. Yes, it'll be more controlled, but Biden is not going to be that effective anyway. Even talking in front of a teleprompter, he's not dynamic at all. So I don't understand that. But I would still say that this is a mystifying thing that the Democrats are trying to do. They're trying to put a man in the White House without running an effective campaign and to just, basically declare that he's winning and then hope that your untruth is true as you run out the clock.
I wonder if in this unprecedented year where people have seen a succession of events that have rendered Trump, in the eyes of many, as damaged goods, as they go to the polling places on November 3rd or vote in advance or by mail or whatever, I wonder how much voters have really thought through the alternative, the idea of Joe Biden as the leader of the free world.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a deliberate strategy not to have them think about that. That's another reason why he's always, I'm not Donald Trump, I'm not Donald Trump. Because what is he going to really say? Is he really going to say, hey, I'm bringing back that establishment swamp, neoconservative interventionist foreign policy that's going to make all the military contractors rich again? We're going to rattle Putin's sabers over Ukraine. We're going to stick our nose into the Middle East. These are things the American people do not want. So, yeah, they don't want people to think about that. They want to paint Trump as this gloom and doom villain, which has been done to just unprecedented levels, even more than 2016 when Trump and Hillary were really going at it. I mean, this dystopian nightmare vision of life in Trump's America, it's all meant to disguise that Biden just wants to return the swamp, back into the White House. So they have to keep that hidden, keep hitting Trump, and try to sneak this guy into the White House when he stands for things that the American people just don't want. I don't see how you're going to turn out undecided voters that way. And I don't see how you're going to turn out the more and more progressive Democratic voters that he needs. Keep saying that you're against fracking now and turn off all those Bernie Sanders supporters that believe, climate change is this existential threat. So he's not convincing the undecideds, and he's alienating the Democratic base. How is that a recipe for winning? How is it? I just don't see it.
Let me close with putting you on the spot. Who's going to win? Who's going to win the election?
Based on some unforeseen thing, there's going to be all kinds of crazy revelations coming out in the next 3 weeks, something really changing the ball. I think this election's over. I've long thought this election is over. Trump has strong supporters. Yet, yes, there are a lot of Americans, millions of Americans who want to go out and vote against this man. But he has not lost those tens of millions of supporters who put him in the White House in 2016. Conversely, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have not given anybody who is not already filled with loathing for Donald Trump a reason to vote for them. So to me, this is going to be an electoral college blowout. The only chance Joe Biden has is if he keeps it close in certain key states like Florida and Texas, and the mail-in voting just changes things, which will bring up the specter of electoral fraud and will just be a may cause civil war in this country. So, they said a Biden blowout is the only way we'll have peace. That's not happening. There's not going to be a Biden blowout. So I see Trump winning this thing comfortably. If it's close, the mail-in voters may help Biden, but it's not going to happen. I think Trump wins this thing going away.
Well, I think a full-on civil war is about the only thing we have yet to witness in this bizarre year like no other. Joe Schaeffer, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Joe is political columnist for LibertyNation.com and frequent contributor. He'll be back before the election. And in the meantime, stay right there because we'll be back with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Read all about it. Election 2020 Big Bottom Flash Reports are coming. On election night, at the bottom of every hour, LibertyNation.com will give you Election Night 2020, 90 seconds at a time, with our Big Bottom Flash Reports. You'll get the drop with our one-stop shop. Tune into LibertyNation.com on election night for our Big Bottom Flash Reports at the bottom of every hour. LibertyNation.com.
And now we have reached a portion of Liberty Nation Radio which we entitled Talkin' Liberty, as we welcome back a man familiar with all of you, our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com, legal affairs editor, and the man we prefer to call our guardian of individual liberty, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us again. Now, Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer charged with George Floyd's murder, which set off months of civil unrest, has been released on $1 million bail. Now, let's use this as a teachable moment to discuss not just what this means for Derek Chauvin, but about the bail process itself and the so-called bondsmen that make all of this possible.
Well, it's one and the same, Tim. The reason why this is a story and there's so much outrage, I think, is about the ignorance regarding this process. That Mr. Chauvin has been released on bail says nothing about whether or not he committed the crime of unlawfully killing Mr. Floyd. All it says is that he is likely to return to court to face those charges at trial, and that he will not be a danger to the public until that time. That's what bail is for, right? People are locked up to ensure that they're going to appear before the judge at trial. And as long as they can prove that they will do that, or evidence that they will do that, that's what it's for. On a side note, by the way, what happened to all these eliminate cash bail advocates? Yeah. They seem to be the same ones that are super animated about Mr. Chauvin's bail, which, by the way, as you said, was set at $1 million. And so typically what that would mean in most places, and I think it does mean it here, is that Mr. Chauvin or his backers, whether that's maybe a police union or even just some private individuals, would have to pay 10% of that money to a bail bondsman. That bondsman goes to the court and says, we will cover the $1 million if Mr. Chauvin flees and cannot be recovered. But the bondsman, by the way, doesn't actually have to put out a single buck unless and until he flees. That's sort of where the bond comes in. They have a bond with the court that says they've got sufficient funds on hand to cover any amount owed.
Okay, let's move on to your favorite city in the entire planet, probably the universe, Philadelphia, where the city is in league with a gun control group, and they are suing the state of Pennsylvania for more gun control.
Well, Tim, I revere the history of the city. I don't celebrate its current political leadership. Let's be clear about that.
I understand.
Yes, it's a fascinating and frustrating, and I mean, it's the politics of the city fathers, if you will, are anti-gun. They always have been vehemently anti-gun in a state that is widely pro-gun. That's kind of a peculiarity. Pennsylvania, they don't release these official numbers, but it's sort of been said that they have more NRA members than any other state. And on a per capita basis, it's just a fantastic number of people who wish to keep and bear arms. But again, the political leadership of the city are lockstep for anti-guns. So they have sued, and they've said that the state government has been sort of derelict in not securing the safety of the people through either A, more gun controls, or B, allowing the states or the localities to enact greater gun controls. One of the things, Tim, that just drives a person like me crazy when they see this, in addition to the sort of advocating for a restriction on fundamental rights, is the resources that it takes to marshal a suit like this. This is a serious lawsuit. It's not just a press release. And the hours that the taxpayers had to spend for the city attorneys to help file it, and the city government in league with an anti-gun organization that actively works to take away the civil rights of Pennsylvanians. It's quite a lot going on there.
Now, up in the New York area, we have what we call the tri-state area, which was New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And we have something similar here where we live, D.C. area. It's D.C., Virginia, Maryland. Same kind of tri-state or entity configuration. And D.C. is now attempting to crack down on drivers from the surrounding areas of Maryland and Virginia. Why is that?
This is about money. And the thing that I think is important for us to talk about it for isn't that this will alleviate the citizenry of so much of their hard-earned dollars, which it will. It's the liberty impact of it. With all of these, they're going to reduce throughout the city speed limits to 20 miles an hour. Well, when the speed limit's 25 and you don't pull over until it's 32 or 34 or something like that, what's that going to do then when it's 20? In terms of how many people are going to be caught up in a law enforcement situation? One of the big impetuses behind the Black Lives Matter movement is the sort of petty offenses. They call them humbles in many jurisdictions, where police officers use the law book to denigrate people and inconvenience them and frustrate them.
Okay, Scott, finally, before we let you go, Orthodox Jews in New York City say they're being targeted by new lockdowns after Governor Andrew Cuomo came down hard on gatherings in those synagogues.
Jewish Lives Matter, Tim, has been the chant in Brooklyn, as the Hasidim are being discriminated against pretty clearly because they don't seem to have a Black Lives Matter or reason for organizing. The activities that they want to do and engage in are gather and worship. And the governor keeps throwing up these kind of like new restrictions that disallow them from doing so. The latest one is for places that have higher levels of infections, is that houses of worship are limited to 25% capacity or 10 people, whichever is fewer. And so that's massively frustrating their right to worship.
Okay, that'll do it. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio, and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose with Mark Angelides, all available on demand anytime, any place at LibertyNation.com. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.